When Evelyn signed up for the exclusive experience at Blackthorn Zoo, she had no idea what she was walking into. The website promised something unique, something thrilling, a chance to get up close and personal with the animals in a way that was impossible anywhere else. A few photos with the big cats, some private encounters with primates, and a VIP tour of the most exotic exhibits. It sounded like a dream come true, especially for someone like Evelyn, who had always loved animals. She had heard whispers about Blackthorn, a secluded zoo deep in the countryside. Some people said it was different, but it was the way they made it sound, like a secret club for those who truly understood and appreciated nature. When she arrived, the place seemed ordinary at first. The zoo was quiet with an unnatural stillness that made her uneasy. There were no other visitors. Only the guide, a man named Hector, greeted her. His smile was warm, but his eyes, there was something off about his eyes. A little too bright, like he could see right through her.
Welcome to Blackthorn,
he said, guiding her through the gates.
We believe in providing a truly immersive experience, something that goes beyond the ordinary.
As they walked through the winding paths of the zoo, Evelyn noticed the animals weren't acting like they should. The lion stared at her with an unnerving, intelligent eyes. The snakes slithered in a pattern that seemed deliberate. Even the birds in their cages were silent, watching her closely.
There's a very special bond between human beings and animals here. One that goes beyond mere observation.
Evelyn didn't know what he meant, but she nodded politely, eager to see more exotic areas of the zoo. They entered a building at the far end of the zoo, one that wasn't on the usual tour. It was dark inside, with a strange metallic smell in the air, as if the building hadn't been properly ventilated. Hector led her down a narrow corridor lit by dim, flickering lights.
Here,
Hector said, opening a door to a large, sterile room. It looked like an operating theater, but with cages lining the walls instead of medical equipment. Evelyn's stomach tightened as she stepped inside, her heart beating faster with every step.
everything is part of the experience. We've developed a process that allows people to truly connect with the animals, to become them.
Evelyn frowned. Become them? What do you mean? Before Hector could respond, there was a soft noise behind her, a low growl. She spun around and froze. In one of the cages, something was moving. At first, it looked like a man, but as her eyes adjusted to the dark, she realized it was no man at all. The figure inside was hunched over, its skin slick and dark, like that of an animal, its face contorted, human in shape but covered in patches of fur. The eyes were the worst, wild, primal, and glowing with an unnatural yellow light. Evelyn staggered back, her throat tightening. What is that? What's happening?
This?
Hector said, stepping beside her.
This is the true experience. The fusion of human and animal. You see, at Blackthorn, we don't just observe nature. We become part of it. We merge the two.
Suddenly, the cages around the room began to rattle. From the shadows, other figures emerged. People, or what had once been people. Some were crawling on all fours, their bodies twisted in grotesque ways, while others stood upright, their limbs elongated, covered in patches of fur and scales. One woman had the face of a wolf, her mouth full of sharp, yellow teeth. Another man had the head of a vulture, his eyes hollow, following Evelyn's every move. Evelyn screamed and backed away towards the door, but Hector blocked her path, his expression eerily calm.
It's too late to leave, Evelyn. Once you've come this far, there's no turning back. You can join us, you know. Become something greater, something more.
The figures in the cages began to move closer, their inhuman eyes fixed on her. The woman with the wolf's face growled low in her throat. Evelyn could hear the sound of something approaching, a heavy, padded step that reverberated in her chest. She turned to run, but as she moved towards the door, it slammed shut with a deafening noise. Panic rose in her throat as the creatures circled her, their twisted forms closing in.
Don't worry. It won't hurt at first. The transformation is gradual. We start small, just a few changes, but soon Soon you will see the world in a way you never could before.
As the others reached out for her, their clawed hands brushing against her skin, Evelyn's mind screamed for escape, but it was already happening. She felt it. The itch beneath her skin, the aching pull in her muscles, the shift of bones beneath her flesh. Her vision blurred as she stumbled back, and in that moment, she realized that they had truly met. It wasn't just an experience, it was an experiment. It was just past dark when the rain began to fall thin and cold, as if the sky was bleeding out its last drops. Emily had been to the zoo all day, photographing the animals for a school project. It was one of those places most people didn't give a second thought to. The kind of place where the cages seemed comforting, familiar, and the animals were always just far enough away to keep things safe. She couldn't put her finger on it, the way the animals watched her, their eyes cold, unblinking, as though they were waiting for something. She'd noticed it for years since she was a child, but never really said anything about it. The zookeepers were friendly enough too, if a little distant, but tonight the entire place felt wrong. She was walking along the winding path towards the reptile house when something caught her attention from the corner of her eye. It was the jaguar's cage. The sleek, black feline that had been laying still for hours was now pacing rapidly back and forth, its eyes fixed on Emily in a way that almost seemed predator. She stopped, watching it move in a rhythm that was almost too precise, too deliberate. As she moved closer, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. There was a man inside the enclosure. At first she thought it was a trick of the light, or perhaps a shadow cast by the jaguar's movement. But then, the figure became clearer. He was crouched low to the ground, mimicking the jaguar's movement. Slow, deliberate, almost animal-like in his grace. His hands were curled into claws, and his head tilted slightly to the side as if he were studying her. The man's eyes were completely black. Heart pounding, Emily stepped back, suddenly aware that the zoo had grown unnervingly quiet. The usual sounds of distant chatter and animal calls were gone. The air was heavy, suffocating, and she could feel her pulse echoing in her ears. The man in the cage stood up, his movement jerking unnatural. His body seemed to stretch in ways that didn't belong to a human, elongating slightly as he pressed his face against the bars, his eyes never leaving her. The jaguar, meanwhile, had stopped moving entirely. It was just standing there, watching. "Help!" a voice whispered behind her, and Emily spun around. No one was there. She took a hesitant step back, still staring at the man, but before she could turn to leave, the jaguar made a strange noise. The sound sent a chill up her spine. She glanced down at its feet and saw something she hadn't noticed before. It was dragging its own shadow. The jaguar's dark figure seemed to writhe like a living thing, trying to escape from the ground beneath it. Then, as if responding to the creature's distress, the man in the cage growled, an inhuman sound, and something inside Emily shifted. For a split second, she saw something horrific in the man's eyes, something ancient, something predator. She turned and ran, her heart hammering in her chest. She didn't stop until she reached the main gate, but as she fumbled with the lock, a distant sound of a laugh echoed in her ear. It wasn't human. It was low, animalistic, and it made her stomach twist. She finally made it out of the zoo and looked back, half expecting to see a man with the black eyes standing at the gate watching her. But there was nothing, only the eerie silence of the night. Weeks later, Emily returned to the zoo, hoping to make sense of what had happened. She had almost convinced herself it was a nightmare or a trick of the mind. But when she asked the staff about the jaguar's cage, the zookeeper's face twisted with confusion.
"There hasn't been a jaguar here for years,"
he said.
"and no one's worked the night shift in months. Why would you ask that?"
Emily's heart sank as she walked away, her thoughts spinning. And then, just as she was about to leave the zoo for good, she saw him again, the man with the black eyes. He was standing at the very back of the zoo, at the edge of the abandoned animal enclosures. This time, he wasn't mimicking a jaguar. He was smiling. But his teeth, Those teeth weren't human at all.